Hello everybody, it's Ann Quinn and welcome to Tell Me Your Story. And my guest today is Joe Denen, who's the city manager for Washington Courthouse. So welcome, Joe.
Well, hello, Ann.
Well, tell me something new. What's going on?
Well, we've been busy uptown, and in particular lately we've been working on, we have some COVID relief money for small businesses.
Oh,
and we've
okay.
been working through those applications and encouraging people to apply. And
So
if
you
they-
can help them, the city can help
Yes.
them? Okay.
If they have 25 or fewer employees,
hmm
and if they're a locally owned business, so it's really geared towards the small business folks. And that's been a lot of fun. Julie from the Chamber has been helping out with that, and Mickey Hunter-Smith. We've been having a good time with that.
Okay. Do you know what? Joe and I have been working together for years, either through Alliance for a Prosperous Downtown or Main Street. And isn't it incredible what's happening to our downtown now? How many windows now are full?
How many windows are full? The support of the community through COVID-19 for those small businesses.
I'm doing my fair share.
Yeah, you always have.
I love to shop.
Has just been exceptional.
Yes.
And the small business folks, they have a very positive attitude now.
Mm-hmm.
It works very well.
I'm excited. It's like when I've got friends that come in from out of town, I'm thrilled that I've got places to take them, and there's such a variety.
There's a variety, and you know what's nice if you go out on a shop hop night, you know, I can go into a store like the Noble Pig, and there's furniture and there's other stuff in there, so I'm just not waiting for wife to be done. So there's some
Right.
interesting things for me to look at and shop with.
Yeah, it's just thrilling for me because I remember I kind of got started with the Alliance for Prosperous Downtown in 2007, and there were so many empty storefronts at that time, so many, and it's just we're more than 3/4 full, I think.
Oh, heavens, yes. And again, the variety's nice, and since we're at the library, I'll mention it. What was done with downtown, you know, it's very difficult to put a specific finger of all the things that we ever tried over the years. There's a book called Tipping Points, and if I remember right, the author's name would be Caldwell, which, if there was an inspiration for downtown, that might have been it. And what it goes through, you know, if you're not somebody that wants to sit and read a whole book, it's organized into different stories about
I've read that.
different events.
It's a great book.
And that is the closest thing that describes what's really happening down
Mm-hmm. It's heartwarming. I love it. It's great. And the library's making our little contributions, even though we're not on the main drag. Have you noticed our beautiful garden?
there. It looks lovely, and that was a huge improvement from what was there years ago.
You mean that old house that was there?
Well,
Or just the garden?
the garden has improved enormously.
Yes, it has.
Mhm. And I can remember too that little landscaped area. Remember how just pathetic that was.
That was.
And that is presentable now and looks decent.
Well, we got to thank the master gardeners. They've been a big help, and Brigetta Heisey with Fayette Soil and Water. They've been a big help to help us improve that garden. So.
A nice group of people.
Yes, it is. It's all good. Well, you know, Joe, I was sad a couple of weeks ago. We normally have the Scarecrow Fest the third weekend of September. And Joe and I usually work the info desk.
Oh, there all day long.
Out there. For 3 days, we're out there all day long. So it was kind of sad that we couldn't do this. And you know what? The weather was perfect.
The weather was, because it was usually hot. And
Very hot.
This weather
Or
would have been
raining.
Perfect.
It was perfect. And of course, we couldn't have it. It was the most gorgeous weather.
And we were always there, the entire Scarecrow Festival, at the information desk to not be able to help you.
We provided the worst information.
The worst service possible.
And we took pride in that.
We tried really hard, but people come up with interesting stories.
Yes. We did a good job selling T-shirts. We were good. We were
did
awesome
great
at that.
We
right.
did great at that.
But information, it was a little dicey.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Occasionally you'd have a bee crisis, but other than
Yeah.
that-
Oh, yeah. Me and the bees. Yeah, that was. But I'm looking forward to next year.
Next year will be great.
Hopefully it will. Do you know? I know that it's really the Chamber of Commerce's thing, but are we going to have a Christmas parade this year?
We haven't talked about that yet.
Okay.
We just resolved trick or treat.
And we're having it.
You're having trick or treat.
Yay! That's wonderful.
So people need to, as much as they can, social distance. If you're uncomfortable participating, then just simply don't.
Right. Just turn your lights
It's
off.
and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I know. Halloween's one of my favorite holidays, so I'm excited that we're going to have this. Okay, so let's talk books.
Okay.
Are you a big reader?
Quite a bit. That is, for me, there's a level of enjoyment and there's also a level of you just continue to develop as a person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, okay, what types of books do you like to read?
Oh, I read a lot of nonfiction historical books.
My favorite too, historical.
Probably for an interview, it's not going to be a barn burner of great interest there, but
Yeah, we're in the minority.
Yeah. What would be more interesting, not a huge amount, I'll read mystery novels, but typically not contemporary ones.
Oh, okay. You like the older
Yeah.
versions.
Mhm.
So when you were a kid, did you read Sherlock Holmes?
Periodically I will again as an adult, and it's not for the plot or anything like that, but the setting of those is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Did you, it just came out, I think, this weekend, Sherlock Holmes' sister, Enola Holmes, is on Netflix.
Really?
And I watched it this weekend,
Mhm.
and it is fabulous. And
Really?
Sherlock is in it, and
Okay.
so's Mycroft. Is it
Mhm.
Mycroft?
The older brother, yeah.
Yes. And of course, in the other books, he doesn't have a sister, but I guess, or did he? Did they have a? Did he have
I
a
don't
sister?
remember him having a sister. I remember Mycroft, the older brother. There, when you think about when Conan Doyle wrote them,
Mm-hmm.
the setting in some of the assumptions about the world come through in the novels, and later on, you have Sherlock, who's the very scientific, very analytical person.
Mm-hmm.
But Conan Doyle himself became very interested in the supernatural, so you begin to get stories like The Hound of the Baskervilles,
Mhm.
and you head off into that territory, which really, it's quite difficult to make that work. But it's interesting how the author changes over time, and that gets reflected later on.
Yeah. Well, I highly recommend watching Enola Holmes. And Enola is alone backwards. She makes that a point
Okay.
in the movie. But I like the Sherlock Holmes that's in this one.
Okay.
And she was a 16-year-old, and she's actually way better than her brother at solving
Oh, really?
crimes. So it's a goodie. Now, I know you're a Churchill fan.
Uh-huh.
And, there's a new book on bestseller list. It's called The Splendid and the Vile,
Mhm.
Saga of the Churchills. Have you
Mhm.
read it?
I have not.
I put it on hold for myself because
Okay.
I'm a Churchill fan myself. So I'm interested in getting that. There's been a million biographies on Winston Churchill.
Oh, nearly endless.
But do you have a favorite biographer?
I don't know that I have a favorite. The problem that you do run into when some authors write about Winston Churchill, they're very much fans. So you get a very distorted view.
They make him out like a saint.
Like he is the saint hero of the world, and he wasn't. I mean, he made mistakes, and he was a
He
human
made some
being.
big mistakes.
Yeah. And the books that he wrote himself, I have to admit, are typically enormously self-serving.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yes. That's interesting. he wrote a gazillion books. That's how, because he was always in debt, and so he
Oh, he needed the
wrote.
money.
So he, and he was evidently a prolific writer. And then what I like is that he would just dictate off the top of his head, and he had all these secretaries that would transcribe. Who can write that way? I mean, like perfect sentences. Like he would just start talking,
Mhm.
and they would be perfect. He would not have to go back and edit.
Yeah, no,
I
I've
find that
often
amazing.
wondered, that's before the age of the computer and word processor, and the idea of dictating a letter I would find very difficult now.
Mm-hmm.
But that would have had to have been a skill that a lot of people had, simply
Because they didn't have any other. I would have to sit it though and write it out in longhand and edit. I just couldn't do it off the top of my head. So I always found that amazing about him.
I mean, personally, there was a point in time where the majority of the time I used to write things in longhand, and then you type. And now you just type because it's easier and
Mhm.
quicker. But that and my handwriting's got to the point where even sometimes it's hard for me to read it. But that changes over time as you got more used to. Originally it was word processors. I remember at one time I had this Miss Corona thing. It looked like a typewriter.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But then you transition quickly into the computer and word processor program.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite biographies, I want to say the last name was Gilbert. It was written in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that amused me about Churchill and his wife Clemmy
Mm-hmm.
was that whenever they were sick, and apparently they came down with colds all the time,
All the time.
they would go to Italy or France to
yes.
recover
You
from a
pack
cold.
up and
Pack up.
Uh-huh.
And they would be gone several weeks or even months to recover from a cold. And it happened so frequently, I just blew my mind. I went, well, wouldn't that be nice?
to just pack up and go to southern France because it's warmer and
Yeah.
Now their immediate family relations were not normal.
Oh no. He had terrible parents.
Horrible parents.
Horrible parents.
And arguably the Churchills were not successful as parents themselves.
Right.
Because most of the kids had issues as they grew up in life.
Well, I guess they really had the aristocracy thing of the Manny's raise you. The parents. I would think I would remember hearing he didn't see his parents for 2 years because they were just traveling constantly. But yet they wrote him horrible letters admonishing him, and telling him that they heard from the nanny that he broke something or he's not studying enough, and they were pretty harsh with him.
Now there's an interesting, it's relatively short, book written by Winston Churchill's grandson.
Oh.
That's a different perspective. It's very much a perspective a grandson has of their grandfather, but at this point in time he's an adult, so he realized that there were many aspects of his personal life and his father's life that just weren't normal. But that's an interesting.
Yeah. I also, it's just the trivia things that I always enjoy. The huge quantities of champagne that he would order from France, and this is one of the reasons why he's always broke, because he had to have the finest brandies, the finest wines, and his bill, it would list the bills that were just
enormous.
Enormous sums of money were spent. And then the other little peculiarity, he always had to have silk underwear, and if it wasn't silk underwear, then he wouldn't wear it. So he had expensive tastes.
Expensive tastes. The lifestyle that he was accustomed to was very different.
Oh yeah.
And arguably, what he had great difficulty with was interacting with the day-to-day world.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't somebody that could figure out a subway schedule or a bus schedule.
No.
That was a completely alien world to him. he also, oddly enough, was very poor at what we would call small talk.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and was very uncomfortable with that. You know, if he was going to have a conversation with somebody, he wanted a purpose to it.
Well, he wanted to control the
Yeah.
conversation.
And, you know, but the small talk of just, you know, hello, how you doing, and that was something that he found very difficult.
Okay. Now, his mother was American. She was
Yeah.
a wealthy American. And his father married her because he needed money. He had the title and the great background, but
Pretty
needed
much
the
the
money.
Downton Abbey situation there.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. And then he died. And then didn't she marry a man like younger than Winston Churchill, younger than her son? And she was always begging him for money. That's some of the
That
things I
sounds
recall.
correct. I can't quite remember that.
Yeah,
So-
she was quite the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that interesting. Did you have a favorite quote from Churchill?
You know, there's so many that's difficult to pin down. It's more the concept that even with what must have been deep down a tremendous amount in certain situations of self-doubt, that you continue to keep on going.
I've got a quote in my office that says, when you're going through hell, keep going. Sometimes I reflect on that during the day. Okay, so when you were a kid, did you have a favorite author besides Sherlock Holmes?
When
Or
I
not
was
the
a
author.
kid, I read a lot, but I can't say that I had a favorite author. Now, I'll tell two stories here. One of which involves Mary Lorraine Davis.
Oh, how wonderful.
When I was in junior high, she was the librarian. And the interest in nonfiction, it really started at that middle school age.
Mm-hmm.
In elementary school, I was not, you wouldn't have labeled me a high-performing student at all. It wasn't really until you reached the middle school age and you changed classes and other things going on that the whole school business became more interesting. But they were probably left over from when it was the high school. You had a number of nonfiction historical books that weren't at a junior high reading level at all.
Mm-hmm.
That I became interested in and would read. Now, the one thing geared toward kids that I distinctly remember, and there was a series of them. One was about the construction of the cathedral, another one was about the construction of the castle, and there was a fictional story.
Macaulay. Is that
Yes.
the author? Mm-hmm.
And there was a fictional sort of story plot that went with them. But really, the book was focused on how you put the building together. And that was something that all those books I reread numerous times.
We have them in our library. In
Well, they're still around
nonfiction.
then?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're popular. I think he did one on mosques, one on cathedrals, one on castles. He was one on how the body works.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's some of his newer things. I'll show you later.
Okay, before
yeah.
we do that.
Yeah. So Mary Lorraine got you involved in those.
She did. She noticed that I had that interest and would point out different books. But that, Mary Lorraine had certainly a strict attitude towards kids. But at the same time, a very compassionate, kind person.
And Miss Mary Lorraine serves on the library board.
Yes, she does.
And she remains passionate. She's here at the library all the time. She reads all the time. And she's a huge supporter of the library and the children's department. And we do book talks all the time. I need to interview her.
That'd be great.
So
interview.
yeah, she's amazing. And she became a librarian later in life like I did too. I think we were both in our
Yes, she did.
40s
Mhm.
before we became librarians. So we have a lot in common. Okay. So do you have much time to read these days, or?
You know, with work and a young child, sometimes that is a little bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes you read a book differently now, per se, than you used to.
Now, did you read to Mary when she was younger?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you use accents?
I don't remember using accents. Now, when she was very small, I in particular remember there was this book, Ladybug Loves Red.
Yes.
And, you know, then Ladybug Loves Green, and, you know, and that, she loved that book, so you read it, and you read it, and you read it. And,
Till you knew it by heart.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, you try the trick of, let's skip a couple pages, but no, she'd point that out to you.
Well, I remember she went through a Peppa Pig phase,
Peppa
where
Pig.
she loved Peppa Pig, and then she would go around the house talking with a British accent.
She would. She would.
I remember you telling me
Uh-huh.
that. I thought that was cute.
No, Peppa Pig was real popular.
Yeah, it's still popular. Yeah, but now she's getting, you know, she'll be in what, middle school next year?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that just
That
happened
seems
so.
like yesterday we brought her home.
Yeah, unbelievable. Okay, so any other books you can tell us about?
I read a lot of books on gardening and horticulture. I can't say that there's a particular author there. Now, that kind of goes in two different directions. One is what you would think of as landscaping, not necessarily gardening.
It's almost like reference then.
You know, that, what I find most interesting is how landscapes change over time. You could call it fashion. But, you know, how somebody in the 17th century would organize a landscape versus today are two radically different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other direction would be what I think of as practical gardening, or, you know, plenty of information to learn.
Yeah. So did you have a splendid garden this year? Was it fabulous?
It did pretty good. Now, I've had some difficulty with the groundhog.
Who won that battle? Who won that?
I think the groundhog is now officially evicted. But that was almost like a Caddyshack show. Because it was a very persistent fellow, because, you know, once I made his life annoying enough in his one burrow, he decided to try and tunnel in a different part of the yard. And,
Yeah, that is annoying when they tear up your garden. Yeah.
He's very fond of cantaloupe.
Yeah. Well, I know. I've seen your backyard and all your flowers in the front, and you do have a green thumb. I limited myself to 3 plants this year in urns, and it was precarious. I mean, just even watering almost seems to be too much for me to.
You know, at the beginning of the season, you know, you're excited to do chores like that, but towards the end of the season, things like watering, so that can get a little tiring.
Yeah, you're ready to pull everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming by and chatting with me about books and.
Well, that was
gardening.
relatively painless.
That was painless, wasn't it? I didn't ask you anything too tricky or too hard. No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And tune in next week. We'll see I don't know who we're going to interview. Maybe Miss Mary Lorraine Davis.
Hey, that's a great idea.
I think that's it. That's my next guest, is Miss Mary Lorraine. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.